Okay, we can call the meeting to order. If you'd rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, agenda review. Anything to add?
I do not.
Okay. Acceptance of the minutes. We have quite a few minutes to approve tonight. First, the Building and Maintenance Committee meeting on October 15th.
So moved.
Second. It's been moved and seconded. Any errors, additions, corrections? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions?
I mean,
Well,
shouldn't be
no,
voting if we didn't go to the meeting, right?
Correct.
Right.
So we have four approved and 5 abstentions. Okay.
Small committee.
Approval of the minutes for the school board meeting from November 5th.
So moved.
Second. Been moved and seconded. Any errors, omissions, corrections? In hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions on that one? Chair votes aye. Thank you. Okay, and then we have the 3 finance committee meetings. The first meeting on November 13th.
So moved.
It's been
Second.
moved and seconded.
Point
Again,
of order, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Could we do all 3 at the same time?
We can, if you'd like to.
I would like to amend the motion then to approve all 3 at this time.
I don't think, yeah.
Oh, okay. We had some people who didn't attend them all, so we'll do them individually. Okay.
Okay.
So the first one, November 13th, it's been moved and seconded. Any changes, corrections? Okay, all those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed and abstentions? We have 6 abstentions. The November 14th meeting of the Finance Committee.
So moved.
Second?
Moved and seconded. Again, any errors, corrections, omissions? All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
Abstention.
We have 5 abstentions on that one. And the November 15th meeting of the Finance Committee.
So moved.
Second?
Moved and seconded. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed and abstentions? 4 abstentions on that. Thank you. Okay, moving on to public input. It's an opportunity for anybody in the public to address the board with anything. There'll also be another opportunity at the end of the meeting.
Good evening.
Bob?
Again, teamwork. I just wanted to give you a handout
Okay.
from the CDC and just pass that out to you. And that's just between drug use and academics.
Okay,
That's all.
thank you.
And I wanted to wish all of you a Merry Christmas.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, superintendent, no, student representative report. Sam? Thank you.
Hello, everyone. There are lots of activities happening this December at the Kingswood Complex. The Kingswood football team helped to kick off the holiday season by walking in Wilboro's Thanksgiving Parade. The High School Student Council is sponsoring the Wish Upon a Star activity and donated 30 Thanksgiving baskets to local families. NHS is visiting retirement homes and spending time with local senior citizens. We will also be playing games and doing crafts with children at the Wilboro Area Children's Center and helping the Meals on Wheels program decorate a new tree at the Wright Museum's Vessels of Trees. The Kingswood Music Program will be hosting its holiday concert on December 8th. And winter sports are starting up at the Kingswood. Kingswood hosted its first winter athletic combine last Friday afternoon. This was an extension of the strength and conditioning program that will give athletes feedback on how they're progressing physically. The combine was designed by Alex Drea, who is certified strength and conditioning coach. We also had winter sports media night on the same night. And we'd like to thank the Kingswood Athletics Booster Clubs for providing us with 60 pizzas to help the 12 feed athletes. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam.
Just 60?
It's off the K.
All right. Superintendent.
Okay. Well, I'm very happy to be here in Tuftonboro, and it was really wonderful to hear all of your voices, all those little voices saying the Pledge of Allegiance. It was lovely. And you all know it very well. And I'm going to turn things over to Ryan Goodpatrick, Tuftonboro School's principal, and Ryan will give us an introduction to an activity now. I'm really curious about this because Mrs. Swinnerton called me for some information. So I think it's going to be a pretty special activity.
Welcome. Thank you for being at Tuftonboro Central School. We are going to have an activity with Mrs. Swinnerton's second graders, and I just wanted to go over a couple of things that are happening here at Tuftonboro. So I have a couple of slides up there if you want to take a look. This year, it's my first year. Very excited. It's been a smooth transition. Excellent faculty, students, community, parents. We were celebrating our 80th birthday. So on September 21st, that we had the all-school assembly. We invited old staff, parents, community members, former principals, Andrea Fournier and Ken Perry came. Superintendent Cuddy Egbert came, spoke to the crowd. And Ken Perry also gave historical tours to all the grade levels. So it was a great day, the fun events, and it was fun to have everybody here and celebrate the 80 years. So the next slide, it's data, but one of the things I wanted to talk about is we're working on behavior. And how do we approach behavior and how do we help students? And this is data from the support center, but what we really have going on here at Tuftonboro is our guidance counselor, Matt Tatro, is working on zone deregulation, working with classes, working with individuals, and being proactive and helping students get past challenges or conflicts. We also have an intervention team that's working, and even today we met with Eric Mann and talked about strategies to help students. What this shows is the other stuff we're working on with the support center and communicating with the guidance counselor and what's happening and how can we support students. So we've got a lot of SSC referrals. I know you can't see that right there, but the yellow part is the SSC referrals, so it's about 72%. We also have a situation where we have buddy teachers, and it's in the green, and one grade is matched up with another grade, so if there's a challenge and they need to calm down, they need to see another structure of a classroom, they have that opportunity. The blue is actually preventative strategies from the support center. So that's happening with our guidance counselor, but it's also happening with the support center. And how can we assist students to get past those challenges so they can have success in the day? The red is office referrals. So it's a very small number. It's about 8%. The majority is seeing students, getting them back on track, and getting their academic work done. The next slide just shows you the number of referrals. So this top one is the number of referrals, and I believe it says 53. The bottom was the number of students processed, which is 114. That's not all 114. We have 122 students. We did not see 114. It was repeats, but not many. Okay? But most kids, once they go for that support, they go back to the classroom, they're ready to go. Another thing that we're working on outside of behavior is writing, the writing workshop. I have a background in writing and working with teachers in writing. And the goal here is we have kindergarten through 6th grade. So there are challenges. Some of them are learning to write letters. Some of them are learning to write sentences. And we have our 6th graders really writing extensive pieces. So it's what's the need for each classroom? How can we work together? And how can we build that foundation and build on that complexity as we get to that 6th grade level and that they're prepared for the middle school. So that's something else we're doing, working as a staff. And Ralph Fletcher is the main author on that. I wanted to point this out. When I sat in front of you all for the first time, and I left Support Center handout pamphlets and a laminated copy of this for all of you, but I sat in front of you and we had questions, answers, there was advice, and one of the things I left with, I believe it was Mr. Brown, who said, it's a challenge because you're building the community of your school, but you're getting them ready for the next community. And so I took that and thought about it, and I came up with this concept of owl tonight. And I presented it to my staff, and then they really kind of ran with it. And Mr. Tatro's brother actually created this image. So it's holding on to that owl of Tuftonboro, and it's got a little night helmet ready to go in transition. And so we're really working with 6th graders on being leaders, setting that example, but also being ready for that next step, because it's nerve-wracking, it's new, and there's some fear there. So we started with the Mara Vista trip talking about this. So we talked to the people at Mira Vista and said, we'd really like to try this concept and see if you can kind of incorporate it into their experience for the 2 days of leadership and problem solving and collaboration. So what the kids have throughout the 2 days are these wooden cookies, so they call them TQs for Tuftonboro Quality, and they hand out 2 of them throughout the 2 days, so each individual gets one. And when they leave with their own wooden cookie. And so on one side they painted the owl with names, and on the other side they painted the knight for that transition. So it's one of the things we're really trying to hit home in setting that leadership, but really preparing kids for the next step. So those are the things that I wanted to talk about, and then I know these guys are moving around. I can hear them whispering behind me. They're ready to go. They look fancy. So, Mrs. Swinnerton.
We're going to stand in front of the stage. Come, guys. Since we're all coming together. All right, so this is the second grade here at Tuftonboro Central School, or half of them, just about. We have a routine in our second grade class there that the students have friendship messages notebooks, and each week they write to a different person within the classroom. And since I'm not the intended audience, their peers are, it is a low-stakes, high-interest activity for them. It's very motivating. They love it. They ask to do it during indoor recess. They write to their peers instead of playing games. So it's something that they really, really enjoy. And it helps me accomplish my student learning objective, which is to increase stamina, writing stamina within my second grade this year. So they have written a little bit about how they feel about writing friendship messages, and they'd like to share that with you. And in the end, they have a friendship message for all of you. So you'll have to raise your hand when they call your name. So remember to shout.
I feel extremely excited to write and receive the letters, and sometimes the pretty artwork they do. Everyone makes it look so good in our notebooks. I love to write to my friends. I wish we could also write to Mr. Gilpatrick too. I love to see the messages, and my favorite part is reading them.
I like friendship messages. I feel great with them, and they help me focus and tell jokes. They are a lot of fun. I like to write, and writing to people makes me happy.
We usually have a new friend to write to each week, and they write to us too. I feel happy when we write to friends because it's exciting. When I receive a letter, I like what they ask me. I feel glad, silly, and thankful. I feel good when I get my letter from a friend. I feel good when I give a letter too. I love our friendship messages.
I love friendship messages. You can write friendly, joyful things. You can say funny things to your friends, and it is fun to do.
On friendship messages days, I feel happy. I like writing to others, and I like getting letters from my friends.
We write sentences and questions and compliments. When we switch our notebooks and read the messages, I feel good when we write to each other.
I like how our friendship messages have changed. We used to just write letters, and now we write questions and compliments too.
I feel good when I get my messages because there are no unkind things, only kind words.
So if you hear your name, raise your hand.
Raise your hand if you're Mr. Jack Widmer.
Thank you so much.
Raise your hand if you're Mrs. Linda Murphy.
Raise your hand if you are Miss Julian Cardinal and Miss Kelly Tiffman.
Edwards.
She's at the very end.
Raise your hand if you're Mr. T.J. Eldridge. Raise your hand if you're Mr. Ernest Brown. Raise your hand if you're Miss Wendy Fenders. Raise your hand if you're Miss Kathy Cuddy Egbert. Raise your hand if you're Miss Stacy Trench or Mr. Ryan.
Raise your hand if you're Miss Kathy Oglenis. Please raise your hand if you are Dr. James Manning. Raise your hand if you are Miss Heather Cummings. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, students.
Thank you.
No budget here.
Really? So cute.
That's this one. This is only she signs here. Superintendent signs it. But so guess what?
That's not the V one.
All right, give it a shot. And I'm going to stand on the side so I'm not in the way of the screen. First of all, thank you for being here tonight. For many years now, we have discussed our preliminary budget in December with the full school board and public following our finance committee meetings. This year, we did have 3 finance committee meetings. We approved the minutes earlier. And even though they weren't too well attended, we did have some interested citizens that were there. And I think it was a very worthwhile process. And they were recorded, so some people have seen them on that we recorded as well. Tonight we're going to take a look at where the budget stands currently. We do not have all the full figures we usually have at this time. The Human Resource Committee is still working with the collective bargaining groups. We have a tentative agreement with the support staff, which will be discussed with the full board later this evening, and will be made public once the union and the board have ratified the agreement. Human Resource Group is also working on an agreement with the teachers on salaries and benefits, and we're optimistic that we'll be able to reach an agreement by the middle of December. And we'll be able to present an agreement to the voters that they can support that is fair to the teachers, taxpayers. As we know, our teachers work hard and have a profound impact on our students, and we recognize and appreciate this. Preparation of the budget begins in October. The principals work with the faculty and staff who provide them with requests or recommendations regarding what is needed for each school. Each administrator submits a budget to the SAU office. The business administrator and superintendent of schools meets with each of them to discuss their requests. If there is a large increase in an individual school budget, unless there is a special circumstance, the administrator is asked to review the budget again and reduce it while keeping their priorities intact. After this, if a large increase remains, a second cut may occur. Personnel requests are made at the same time. Requests for positions may or may not proceed to the Finance Committee, depending on the strength of the rationale outlining the need for these positions. The business administrator reviews the district line items and determines the amounts to request based on past history, current expenditures, and projected pricing. After cuts, adjustments, and reallocations have been made, the Finance Committee meets with each of the principals, the special education director, the business administrator, and the superintendent to hear the budget requests. At this time, the Finance Committee recommends the changes they feel are necessary to bring a budget to the voters that supports what we are trying to accomplish for our students in our schools and that the voters can support. This preliminary budget is a result of that process. When the Finance Committee reviews the requests from the administrators, we consider the programs and services needed to provide a quality education for our students. We are proud of our programs and what our students accomplish. There is a relationship between the condition of the economy and how much taxpayers can afford to pay. We pay attention to the condition of the economy and try to limit the budget increases as much as possible without compromising the quality of our students' education. It is all a balancing act. Right now, the economy is better than it has been for a long time. However, not everyone has benefited from these favorable conditions, so we continue to keep the budget as low as possible without compromising what our students' needs are. Collective bargaining agreements have a substantial impact on the budget, since 76 to 78% of the budget is spent on personnel. Hiring decisions are some of the most important decisions made in the district. Our staff is our most valuable resource. Maintaining our infrastructure is important in order to preserve the value of our assets and to prevent accelerating costs. If smaller problems are left unattended, they will become larger and more costly. Our enrollment drives many of the budget requests. Supplies, equipment, and personnel are all related to how many students we have. Last but not least, changing social conditions impact what we need to provide our students. Our students need to be prepared for a world dominated by technology. If we are going to teach our children to use technology, there are going to be equipment costs. Another example of changing social conditions is the impact of the opioid crisis. We have more students than ever living with parents who are addicted to opioids or living with other relatives due to addiction in the families. This has a serious impact on the children and the services they need both in and out of school. The district controls growth in several ways. The final budget is based on priorities. Distinguishing between wants and needs is part of the process. Needs are prioritized and included in the budget. However, not every request that is made is granted. Because revenue offsets the tax rate, our SAU office is doing as much as it can to capture reimbursements to the district through Medicaid and catastrophic aid. All the grants we are entitled to are pursued, and the district has also had success in accessing competitive grant funds. For example, our 21st Century After-School program in Ossipee and our robotics program received substantial grant funding. Our energy conservation project has been an extreme means of controlling energy costs and has helped to offset other increasing costs. Careful long-term planning is another part of controlling costs, though this can be difficult. It is not uncommon to be saddled with an expense as a result of a mandate from the state legislature without the opportunity to plan for it. This year, for example, the legislation was passed requiring water testing to be completed prior to July 1st. In other words, this fiscal year, at a cost of $31,000 to the district. District enrollment is up this year. In some schools, we have more students, and in others, fewer. Enrollment in each school varies from year to year. This has made staffing difficult. However, the schools have found some creative ways to make this work without reducing staff from one year and then hiring the next. As the numbers fluctuate at Carpenter and Crescent Lake schools, for example, they share a staff member based on which school has the need for an additional classroom. The staff member moves from one school to another each year due to the fluctuation. It is important to note that we anticipated the declining enrollment and reduced the staff accordingly through attrition. This has kept the growth of the budget down, while at the same time we continue to meet the needs of our students. Currently, after a number of years of declining enrollment, the number of students in our schools seems to be trending upwards, which is great news. This is a quick snapshot of the major budget categories and where each currently stands. The general fund increase is at 4.59%. The variation in warrant articles will depend on the collective bargaining agreements. Debt service is down 3.94%, and the total budget increase is currently projected at 2.09%. Under employee expenses, the wages do not include any costs associated with the collective bargaining agreements or new positions. Changes in benefits and salaries will be included once the agreements are ratified. Personnel recommendations this year include a new part-time construction trades teacher at 50%, a new part-time construction trades teacher, a 50% L&A position formerly covered by the Perkins Grant, a 50% special education position for New Durham School, and a 30% increase in special education position for the Tuftonboro Elementary School. Part-time outreach counselors for Effingham at 20% and Ossipee at 60% were requested due to the effect of the opioid crisis on children and families. These positions are very much needed. At this time, it is recommended that these positions be funded through a grant available for this purpose in order to keep the budget down. Health insurance is down for the first time in many years, which is helpful. Once again, the New Hampshire retirement system is up significantly. And as I have stated many times, the state continues to renege on its promise to pay for its share of the retirement costs and has shifted the responsibility to local taxpayers. And I've said this over and over, and I'm going to just repeat it again. The state used to pay 35% of the retirement costs for the teachers. They now pay 0. Over the years, they've continued to take it down and down and down, from 35 down to 0. That, right now, in this particular budget, accounts for about $750,000 that the taxpayers have to pay, that the state has said they no longer get paid. Just want to make that clear. It's upsetting to me that the state can do that, but that's where we are. Looking at the other expense areas, health services shows an increase. This is due to two factors, and part of this was discussed at the finance meetings that we had as well. The cost of our employee agreement with Huggins Hospital for school nurses increased, and a nursing position that was formerly included in wages is now included with Huggins agreement. So we've basically transferred the cost from payroll to the Huggins agreement. And even with the increase, it is still more cost effective for the district to employ our nurses through the hospital. Several expense objects have decreased: water and sewer, printing and postage, for example. Snow removal, property and liability insurance, and service agreements are now more expensive, and the increase is reflected in these numbers. Throughout the general fund, there are reductions which offset some of the increases. New equipment and replacement of equipment are the most significant increases. This is in large part due to the need to keep our equipment up to date. 10 years ago, during the recession, we were fortunate to receive ARRA funds in the form of a federal grant, for a grant from the federal government. This gave us, the district, the opportunity to purchase smart boards and computers for our students. It is time to replace and add to this equipment. And again, we've all heard how important technology is today, and this is where most of those funds will be spent. We are well beyond the point where we should be replacing and adding to our technology infrastructure servers as a critical need. The world has become more and more driven by technology, and what used to be a luxury in this area is now essential. In the past few years, we have retired the Ossipee, Effingham, and New Durham bonds. We were also able to renegotiate our debt with the Municipal Bond Bank for the Kingswood Complex building project, resulting in a reduction of $41,000 or more each year until the bond is paid off. Each year, we have presented a capital improvement warrant article in order to provide a safe and healthy environment for our students and also to protect our assets. For several years prior to the Kingswood project, the capital improvement warrant article was $200,000. It was reduced during the project and has remained for the most part at $150,000 a year. Last year, we kept the warrant article at $150,000 with the caveat that given the age of some of our buildings and the upkeep required, it was likely that we would be recommending $200,000 this year. Before we leave that, once we get all of the numbers in our budget, the collective bargaining agreements and any other changes, we may or may not keep that $200,000 in there. That's not a locked-in number at this point. We're hoping we can do that, but again, we want to keep the taxpayers in mind when we put the final numbers together. Each year, we have also presented a turf field capital reserve warrant article. Our beautiful fields have a life expectancy of approximately 12 years at a cost of between $700,000 and $750,000 to replace. The capital reserve was established to avoid getting hit with a large expense all at once. The expense is predictable, and spreading it out over time is a much more reasonable way for the taxpayers to manage this expense. The Finance Committee is again proposing to fund the account with money from the unreserved fund balance at the end of the year not to exceed $60,000. We would like to stay on schedule and have the money available when the replacement is needed. Information about the 3 negotiated agreements will be available once we have reached agreement with each group and the unions and board have ratified the agreements. The total impact of the warrant articles will also be available at that time. This year, we are pleased to see some increases in our revenue. This is the one area of the budget we like to see increases. The more revenue we generate, the more taxes are offset. Our building aid decreases as we pay down the bond, so we see less revenue there. The good news is the increase in projected revenues we see in the state grant, special education, formerly known as catastrophic aid, Medicaid, vocational programs, and tuition. Tuition is estimated at $2 million this year. And these are the important dates to remember. The school board meeting and the final budget for the adoption will be January 7th, and that meeting will be in the at the high school in the conference room, in the lecture hall on January 7th. January 8th is the last day for collective bargaining. Certainly that doesn't make sense to me because the last day for collective bargaining is after the final budget adoption. Anyway, that's what it is. January 8th is also the last day for petition warrant articles. January 28th, the last day to post the warrant budget and default budget. And February 2nd is the deliberative session. And then in March 12th is our voting day. So that's kind of where we are today. It's not a complete picture of the budget yet. Hopefully it will be within the next couple of weeks. And we'll put together our final presentation for our meeting in January. Any questions I can answer right now, although I know we're a little sketchy on. Yes?
Thank you for that presentation. My name's Diane Smith. I'm from the town of Brookfield. My question is relative to the petition warrant articles. Brookfield is a traditional town meeting, not an SB2, and my understanding is that the school district operates essentially an SB2 rules.
Correct.
I am not familiar what the petition warrant article requirements are. I know what they are for the town, but I don't know what they are for SB2. Could you explain that, please?
I think probably the best thing for me to do is to get some written information for you so that you have it all. So if you would like to come over to the office or give me your email, I can put that together for you and send it to you.
Okay.
Because I know the rules may be a little bit different. I don't want to mislead you on what they may or may not be, so.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anyone else? Yes?
Jonathan Smith from the town of Ospey. Do you carry over funds from the previous year at all, like put into an unassigned fund balance? Do you do that?
We do not.
So
No.
you operate dollar to dollar then?
Yes.
Okay.
We have, the schools are allowed, if they have a warrant article that is approved by the legislative body in March, to retain fund balance, but this district has not chosen to do that. That's in the last, I think, 5 years.
Yeah. And I think it was like 2.5%.
It's 2.5% of your surplus that you
Right.
can keep.
And just a follow-up question on the turf field, might be out of your purview, but it seems expensive to operate a turf field. Is that cheaper than grass, a natural turf type of field with sprinklers? And it seems very expensive.
Well, I think basically it may be, I don't think the cost is going to be a whole lot different. What we accomplish is to have a field that the students can actually play on. When we had a grass field, between hockey, field hockey, lacrosse, football, and all, soccer and all, they never had time to recover the field. Now with the turf field, it's in good shape all the time. It is an expensive proposition, but again, those funds come out of any undesignated fund balance at the end of the year before anything else goes back to the taxpayers. So we've been able to put away $60,000 for how many years now? 7 years?
Started in 2013, 14.
So I think we've got 5 years.
So we have 5 years put away now toward the 12-year process. And again, with interest earned on that money too, we're going to be well into that $720,000. So when we have to do it, we write out a check, have it done, and then we can start the process again for another 12 years.
Right.
So It sounds like a lot of money, but it's much better for our students to play on that kind of a surface, and a lot easier for us to take care of.
I just got one more
Sure.
point to make, I guess. It's not relative to this budget, but it's relative to the budgets going back for 10 years. Today I had the privilege to sit down with the superintendent and just understand the whole formula and how it works, and I got a pretty good understanding of the whole process. But I decided to look back 10 years, back to 2009, and just to see how the budget changed over the last 10 years. So I just went to 2009 and to this most recent current budget. So Ossipee, where I'm from, for example, the budget increased 38.45%. In 2009, it was 4.4 million, I'm rounding. Today, the amount to be raised by taxation is 7.2 million. I'll take another town, Wolfboro. Back in 2009, they were 8.1 million. Today, they're 12.3 million, which is a 34% increase. What I'm going with this is that growth over those 10 years, when CPI was 17.6%, is not sustainable. I don't know what the answer is, but that's an exponential growth. That's more than double of what CPI is. And every other town in there is similar. I mean, Tuftonboro was about 28%, Effingham was 25%, Brookfield was 28%. So they all have substantial increases in that 10-year span. And I know you can't answer back to the, I get it, but I'm just pointing out the.
I can't tell you exactly
Yeah.
answer that, obviously,
Right.
but obviously, because we're 78% of our budget is people-related.
Right.
And so with health costs and all of that stuff as part of the process, that's part of it. But again, all of us, I'm still going to come back to the state.
Right.
You know, where the state says, you know, you pay the 750 grand. We're not going to pay it anymore. That's not fair to the taxpayers, because that was a promise that the state made when the retirement system was put in place back in the 70s. Now, the state legislature has said, we're not going to pay it anymore. So who pays the bill? You know, take $750,000 out of this equation for the last, not 750 every year,
Right.
but 750 this year, 700 last year, 675 a year. Take that out for the last, I think it's 5 or 6 years, that has been zero, and see where your numbers come in then. It's going to be a little bit closer. So a lot of this, some of this is out of our control, unfortunately.
I don't know the totality of where these numbers come from. I'm looking at the bottom line numbers, which is ultimately what the taxpayer has to pay, regardless of how it gets there. And that's the pain that people feel.
That's why I keep hammering away on retirement as one item. And the other thing is a stabilization grant that the state has been paying. They're taking that away at 4% per year, and this year I think it's about $140,000, $150,000, something like that they're going to take away. So add that to the 750, and there's $900,000 in this budget that was the state used to pay, but now you guys have to pay, which isn't fair, but that's where we're at. So we try to maintain what we can maintain ourselves and present a budget that is as reasonable as possible, but we have to deal with the state reneging on their responsibilities, unfortunately. Yes, sir.
I would just comment on your end-of-year fund balance. The turf field is $60,000. If we don't have a fund balance there, there's no money going into that account.
Okay.
Right.
The other side of that coin is, all the rest of the monies that are left is returned as a credit to the towns.
Okay.
And we have consistently had funds returned to the towns because management is taking care of watching the numbers, and this board keeps a close eye on them too.
And one of the important areas, I think, on the budget to understand too, even when you look at the detail on some of the line items, you'll notice special education has one, where last year we budgeted $1.4 million and we only spent $800,000. Well, we're not going to reduce that to $800,000 because we don't know what's going to happen with special ed, and you have to prepare for that just in case. So if some of that money is not spent, that's part of that reserve balance that winds up going back to the taxpayers as a credit to the taxes. So we try, again, it's a balancing act between what we can do, what we have the ability to maintain. So, thank you for your question. Anyone else? Yes?
You mentioned, I believe you said that tuition is going to be $2 million. And I think that's an increase over the previous year, is that not correct? I'm sorry? And is that a commitment that's being made by whoever's paying the tuition?
Well, that's, most of that comes from the Middleton students that are now attending middle school and high school. We have about 130 students there. So that number times their tuition rate is the bulk of that money. And we have tuition students from some other towns, a few tuition students from other towns that come in as well. So, yeah.
And that is a contract, a 10-year.
Yes, that is, the contract with Middleton's a 10-year contract.
But it's not a fixed, it's a per
Their
student?
tuition rate goes up with a percentage of our general fund balance going up. So if our general fund goes up 4%, their tuition will go up 4%.
But is there a factor also for the number of students that they send?
Well, they pay tuition for each student, so it's a rate times the number of students, and that rate changes based on our budget. Yeah. Yeah. Anyone else? Thank you very much. Appreciate your questions. Appreciate you being here.
The wait time while computers are set up is always, it's always hard on the person setting it up. So, but, all right. Carolyn, I just want to say a few words about the reason that you're here. I'm very happy to have you here. Thank you so much for coming. I know it's a long drive for you. We, as all of you know, have been working on our math instruction. One of the things that we would like to see happen for our students is a deeper understanding of math and the ability to not just do formulas, but to really be able to apply the math so that it is applicable in the real world. Because just knowing a formula and just understanding how to do a calculation is really no longer acceptable in today's world. Math skills have really become more critical than, they've always been critical, but I think even more so now in this world of STEM. So Carolyn is with us, and she's been with our elementary schools for a period of time, and we're seeing great growth and gains in our elementary schools. And so it's time to move that up, and she's been working at the middle school, which is great. And I'm going to actually have Katie talk a little bit about Carolyn's qualifications. Brag on you a little bit, Carolyn.
Welcome. Yes, Carolyn started as a middle school teacher, and she taught in California and in Concord, New Hampshire, so she's been far and near. She's come back, and now she started as a math consultant. She's worked with many districts across the state and with various other organizations. And for the past 3 years, She has been working with our upper elementary school teachers and now our middle school teachers to work on shifting math instruction toward sense-making and collaborative strategies to increase that understanding and application. So I'm going to turn it over to Carolyn Morster.
Thank you, Ms. Keeley. So thank you all so much for having me. It has been a real joy working with your teachers and your students. And I'm excited. I was in the middle school today. So I asked some of the students, before the school board, could you give me, a little write-up for 2 minutes about what math means to you and what your experience is in mathematics. So you'll see some of their quotes scattered throughout the presentation from your students. So why shift mathematics education? Why shift our instruction? And it really goes to the idea that the world has shifted. So when we started teaching students mathematics, we were training them to do calculations for factories and assembly lines. They needed to be precise, they needed to calculate, and that's what we focused on in our classrooms. But now, of course, we have calculators, computers, robots to do those calculations. And all our students have their phones in their backpacks or sticking out of their back pockets, right? And in a lot of homes, we have Alexa in the room to say, hey, what's 4 times 3? So that's not to say that our students shouldn't know multiplication. They do, they should, and they do. But it also speaks to a greater purpose now about what we need to be doing in mathematics and what we're preparing our students to be able to do in the world beyond our math classrooms. So now, when we look at internationally what's happening, we have, we see United States there kind of bolded. It's okay, you can't read all those numbers. But you'll see that, hey, we're not doing terribly on this international math assessment. However, the reason, when we break apart the questions that our students are being asked, the reason we're not doing terribly is because of a very high score in the knowing category of the mathematics test. So with the questions broken apart, our students know math, they can calculate, meaning think fluency, think operations, formulas. However, in applying and reasoning, there are little alert symbols next to those scores saying these scores are very low given your overall score. You shouldn't actually be this low in applying and reasoning given your overall score on this international assessment. So when we think about preparing our students to go out into this global economy and be competitive, we really need them to be able to apply and reason, because the calculators, computers, and robots are going to be doing the calculations and the knowing. For example, today in math class, one of the big questions was, what happens when we subtract a negative? And so one of the boys stuck his little hand up. He said, I just Googled it. I was like, of course you just Googled it, and what did you find out? And so he says, 2 negatives make a positive. Well, that's very interesting, because that is what Google gave him for information. But we had to really think about that. And so the whole idea is, okay, you have resources in your pocket, but can you reason what they're telling you? Can you make sense of it, and does it make sense to you? Do you agree? And so another student said, I disagree. I have a counter argument. Okay, so he says, because if I have -2 plus -3, I don't get a positive. And those are 2 negatives. And so it's this idea that we need to be able to use that technology, we need to be able to use our resources, but we have to know how to apply it and how to reason it. So the essential questions we ask when we're thinking about shifting are, how do we shift the mindset we're reinforcing in our students? How do we shift the math practices that we're requiring from our students? And how do we shift the math concepts that we're teaching? So if we're not preparing our students for factories, but we're preparing them to go out and do reasoning and application, what does that mean in terms of our content? So traditionally, our perception has been that there are some people who are math people and others are not. How many of you have had some sort of disillusion in your life? Okay, right, we all have at different times, right? So this has created a very exclusive performance culture around mathematics. It's always been separate from our reading and writing cultures, where of course you're going to be readers and of course you're going to be writers, but some of you might not choose math, right? Okay, so that's been very exclusive to a lot of our kids and a lot of people in our culture. You can see this table. This comes from a table in Ossipee in your, one of your 4th grade classrooms. And all these students are huddled around together, collaborating on a sort that they were doing. And so the shift that we're talking about is where everyone is included at that table. Because if everyone is a math person, then that can be true if we change what math instruction really is. It's about challenging all students to think deeply and make connections and grow as mathematicians using the math practices by the Common Core State Standards, then all students are welcome at that table because everyone can grow and everyone can practice being a mathematician according to this Common Core Standards of math practices. Now this is important because Joe Bowler, a mathematics education professor at Stanford University, has done extensive research on the idea of growth mindset in mathematics versus a fixed mindset. So a fixed mindset in mathematics would be, I have to get the right answer. If I don't, I'm not good at math. And so that's driving a lot of the mental states of our students, right? I have to get it right or I'm not good at math. And so what we see as kids grow older is this almost acceptance, like, it's okay, math just won't be something I do. It won't be something that's me. It's okay, I'm not a math person. And instead, we want to shift that. And it shows that when we teach kids about growth mindset, a growth mindset says everyone can be a math person, everyone can learn and grow in mathematics, given the right support and resources, then we actually see that those brains operate differently. So the red in that growth mindset brain is actually showing greater activity, greater brain activity, because that brain has a growth mindset on the brain scans. When you look at test data, this is Joe Bowler's research, you can see that students who have a growth mindset actually achieve more than those students who have a fixed mindset. So this is data over fall to 7th grade to spring to 8th grade of students in a middle school that she conducted the research on. Now this makes sense, right? Because how many of us have gone into something thinking, I can't, and then we proved ourselves right? We didn't, or couldn't. And then how many of us have gone into something and said, oh, we can own this, and then we do, right? So our brains definitely determine a lot of our capabilities, and that's what we're finding proven now in the brain science and mathematics. So, given all this brain talk, let's do a number talk. And I'm going to have you all try to enter into it in a growth mindset mentality. So we're going to solve a problem mentally. And I'm going to ask you to put your thumb up when you have a solution. And then you can put additional thumbs or fingers up, one thumb, up if you could show ways, different ways to prove your thinking. Okay, so you're just kind of calculating in your head. And we're going to do everyone's favorite topic, fractions. So, 3/4 divided by 1/2. Think about it. Just put up a thumb when you feel like you have an answer. Another thumb if you feel like you can prove it. I won't make you, don't worry. There you go, thumb, thank you. Great. You're working on it, thinking about it. And I do realize too, it's almost 8 o'clock at night. It's always harder. All right, so you can keep thinking, but I'm gonna move to the next slide. There are a couple possible teacher moves at this moment. So a traditional teacher move at this moment is to call on a student. Someone raised their hand who got an answer. So is this, nod your heads if this was similar to a math class you sat in growing up? Yep. And so the person who you knew would raise their hand and answered, right? And so sometimes a teacher like called on you without your hand up, right? And so then you have this situation where if the student's correct, it's yes, right? Great, and you keep moving, right? Because that one student knew the answer to that one problem, so we're all gonna keep moving. Or if incorrect, then the teacher might say, anyone else, right? And call on someone else. So the goal of this teacher strategy is correct answer, right? That's driving that instructional strategy. So if we're thinking about mindset and reinforcing growth mindset, here's a different strategy. So instead, we could have students pair share. Okay, I see thumbs around the room. You all have an idea. Go ahead and turn to your partner, talk to them. What did you get? listen to what they got, collaborate, share your strategy. Then we take all the answers in the room. So sometimes it's like a list, like 5, okay? And I write 5 with a smile, 3, 2.5, 1.5, and I'm listing it. And then I put it back on them. Okay, so we have a list of answers up here. So now, what's reasonable? What makes sense? Who can prove that one of these is right and disprove the others? So now they're talking to each other. I'm not giving the feedback of what I'm judging is right or wrong, but they're convincing each other through their strategies. So the goal here is sense-making and growth. So we want all of them to reason, but we also want them to learn something that we emphasize very, very regularly, which is in mathematics, you have a right to your first thinking. And then, as mathematicians, we listen to the thinking of others, and we always have the right to change our minds. And I will say that regularly to my students and all the students I work with, and I tell them this goes beyond math. You always have the right to change your mind, and this is the process of collaboration. We have our first thinking, which we can own. We listen to others, and we have the right to change our mind. And it's very powerful because I often go into math classes where students will say, I'm not going to answer. I might be wrong. And that fear is crippling them and making it so that they can't even respond. And so this is saying, we're all going to learn no matter what. So thinking about that mindset we're reinforcing, that actually is also setting students up for and prepping them in the math practices. So this is a kid's version of the mathematical practices that are in the Common Core standards. These are the mathematical standards that follow all students from kindergarten through 12th grade. So we can focus and talk about content over and like till we're blue in the face, but these 8 standards are the ones that go with the kids from grade to grade to grade. So we could even put up a debate that these are the ones that are the most important in terms of emphasis. So if you think about that number talk, what did we have students do? Well, make sense of a problem, persevere, right? They had to reason about it, and then they had to talk with each other, construct viable arguments, and then listen to the reasoning of others. Some of them may have proven their point with a model. Some of them might have pulled manipulatives out and proven it with their tools. Some of them, or all of them, had to be attending to precision and making sure they used accurate vocabulary. And they were looking for and connecting from, bringing what they knew from the past into the problem and saying, based on what I know here, it makes sense to do this. I'm seeing patterns here. So thinking about, in just that one instructional strategy shift, we changed the mindset of what we were focusing on, but we also required these math practices for our students to use. So in terms of the math concepts, ready? How many of you with the fraction division multiplied by the reciprocal to get the answer? Yes, I'm seeing a lot of yeses, right? Okay. How many of you divided straight across? That's awesome. I haven't seen a lot of adults who know that you can even do that, right? So divided straight across. How many of you asked, how many halves are in 3/4? Figure it out. And how many of you asked 3/4 is half of what? How many of you knew that there were 2 ways to even ask that division question? How many of you visualized the tape diagram? Good for you. How about the tape diagram for that question? Do you notice how there are 2 different tape diagrams depending on how you asked it in your head? Or a number line. How many of you visualized a number line? Or, notice there are 2 different types of number lines depending on how you asked it in your head. How many of you used the clock? So there's so many ways that the kids talk about and to defend their reasoning. And they learn that I can visualize this mathematics and make sense of it. So when we talk about strategies, these are 2 of your students in your district. A 7th grader said, I like math because we get to use different strategies to solve problems. Some strategies are harder than others, but that is how we learn. And I love that she wrote this link between harder and how we learn, because that's something we drill in daily. Like, I see you struggling, this is a good day, because that means this problem is worthy of your attention and worthy of your time, because struggle means you're learning and growing. So a traditional perception is that most students do not need visuals because they already know how to get the answer. And so I'm going to take you just for a moment back to your math days and think, were you aware of, or were you someone who experienced this thing where geometry was way easier than algebra? Or algebra was way easier than geometry, right? So you kind of thought there was like one side of the brain, the other side of the brain maybe. And when we think about it, geometry often appeals to a lot of learners who struggled in algebra because, can you yell it out? Why? What's special about geometry? Visual, right? And actually mathematics is extremely visual, but in our attempt to be efficient in teaching it, to get people ready for calculating in the factories, we've left out its visual nature. We've left out the creativity that actually gets us to these algorithms. So we've added the visuals back in. So starting in kindergarten, students are representing numbers with number bonds. As early as first grade, they're implementing tape diagrams and number lines. In sixth grade, double number lines. As early as second grade, area models, or at least arrays, which turn into area models in fourth grade. In first and second grade, they're starting those place value charts. Sixth grade, they'll look at tables and graphs. And so everything they're learning now is attached to a visual model. And these coherent visual models follow them throughout different topics, but also across grades. So what's been remarkable is to watch students go from learning the tape diagram with multiplication, or learning the place value chart with multiplication, and then sliding into division and learning how to divide first with a place value chart. And then using that place value chart to create the narrative for the algorithm. We all memorize perhaps a way to do division algorithm. They can see what's happening on a place value chart as they do the division algorithm. And it makes sense because it's connected to something visual. So we have this idea that we're shifting mindset, math practices, math concepts. But what does that look like in the flow of a class structure? So traditionally, we have focused on what students know. And so the shift is where we're teaching in a way of focusing on how students grow. I really liked what those two words rhymed. So I made something out of that. Okay, so we're really looking at the grow over the know. And so if you look at the top model, that's probably what looks very familiar to you based on your math experience. The teacher starts with some notes, right? Then you get some practice, you take a quiz, we go over what didn't go well. And so the shift is to say, let's put it in the hands of the students first and see what they can make sense of. Then let's have them take that and compare it to either a model, my work, each other's work, some sort of feedback where they're comparing their thinking to other thinking, and then making at least one edit to their own work. And then reflecting on their growth from that edit. And so if we look at, say, two students, student A and student B, thinking about Laura as an advanced student and Jacob as a struggling student, let's think of their story in this top model. So if we think of Laura, when the teacher teaches, she's usually kind of feeling bored, right? Or she's just absorbing it really quickly and is ready to move on. She's moving on to the practice which she can do independently and on her own and get right from the beginning. She aces her quiz and then she's sitting through going over the problems. So her narrative starts to become, I want to go faster. This is boring, right? And so then if you have our student B, Jacob, struggling, his story sounds something like this. The student starts teaching, and he's never really understood what the teacher's talking about. So he might be nudging or kicking or looking at the ceiling or looking compliant, but just not absorbing it. So he either has to be sent out of the room or he's just not getting what he needs. Then he goes into practice and he's the one whose hand is up or his head is down, and there's only one Jacob in most classrooms. So the teacher feels the stress of bouncing from Jacob to Jacob, right? Trying to help all of those Jacobs. And then he gets to this practice, which he doesn't do well, so then he goes to the teacher going over the problem, and he's right back at that original setting where he didn't know what the teacher was talking about, and now she's just doing it again. Okay, so then we go to this model. Now we're not going to make Laura and Jacob necessarily be partners, but let's assume they have a partner that they get along well with, which is what we're doing in all the classrooms. You have a partner. And so now we're putting a task in front of them and saying, just do what makes sense to you. to start, you've got, say, 7 minutes. Timer goes off, and then it's, all right, you're going to gallery walk. Get up. Look at other people's papers. My paper's out. Check it out. Now, it's been really cool. I had a student who was really struggling, never really had found his place at the table in mathematics, pick up his paper and walk right over to mine and start copying it. Copied the whole thing, and then went, I have all the answers. And the greatest part of that was that I was like, if I had stood at the front of the room and told him, write these things down, he wouldn't have written any of it. And now he's flaunting that he's got it all down on his paper. The cool thing too is his friends were like, that's cheating. And we had to rewrite the script of what it is to be a mathematician, which is you do your first thinking and then you go out and you get more. He just went out and got more thinking and added it to his paper. And then he used that to go into the next task. And so one line we like to use is from cheaters to leaders, right? Because we're really learning collaboratively. We're learning from one another. And so then we're reflecting on that, like this is what I own. And the positive thing here is that Laura might have a paper still that looks different than Jacob's at the end, but Laura's still responsible for at least one edit as well. So it's on me as teacher to make sure my paper that I put out is rich with mathematical vocabulary, has deep models that really show the meaning, and that she's owning something on my paper or something on someone else's paper that can make her paper better as well. Because our goal is to all become better communicators of the mathematics and deeper thinkers of the mathematics. So here, 2 students working together and a 7th grader reported out, I feel like when I am in class, working with someone else helps me. So this was just to that big prompt of, tell me about math class. So we have another process that really does some simultaneous shifts. Mindset meets practices, meets math content. And we have been doing this, it's in classrooms all over the district. But in districts I work with, we start this as early as kindergarten. So we tell the students that they are going to learn to become daring problem solvers. And the way they become daring problem solvers is to work with a partner, and they start by discussing their thinking. And then they say, I agree. And they discuss until they agree. And then they can record, and then they look at each other's work and edit according to, yep, that's what I said. Now, if you think of Jacob in this setting, he's got someone who's checking in with him all the way through. This is what I think. What do you think, Jacob? Sure, right? And this is the partner now instead of the teacher running around to all these other people. Now think of the Laras in the room. Jacob could be saying, I don't get what you're saying. And then that person has to explain in another way. And we all know who have ever been teachers before, teaching is the very best way to learn content deeper and more meaningfully. And so I think I always tell the story of a 6th grader, she's now a 7th grader in your district. I was here actually, and she was working on a robotics program at recess. So I was like, oh, this is so cool what you're doing. She's like, yes, I'm going to own an engineering company someday. I was like, yes, you are. It was really exciting to hear. So then I had her in her 6th grade math class right after recess. And she had her table group, and they were doing a DARE problem, and her people at the table were looking at her like, as she was explaining. And I thought, this is so perfect for someone who wants to run an engineering company someday, her very own company. Because if she can't break her thinking down enough to bring these folks along with her, she can't run a company. But if she can break it down enough to bring this table group forward, which she did, then she's got that practice to be able to then run her company someday. And so we require, when you think about the collaboration here and the practices and the mindset, but we also require that students are modeling their thinking in the problem-solving process as well as showing their equations. So a lot of times you have partners where you might peg someone as a struggling math student, and that kiddo is the one helping the other student with the visual model. Because that student who we've pegged as advanced has done a really good job absorbing a calculation and a method for calculating, but really can't visualize it. And so they're really coming together as a team and challenging and helping each other. So 7th grader pegged on his or her paper, my favorite part of the day is math. I also loved doing DARE problems. And I'm talking word problems. This is our traditional, these are word problems. And the kids are, yay, I get to do a DARE problem, and they're doing them almost every single day. So I'll just leave you with some true confessions from 7th graders in your district. Well, to be honest, I love math. Sometimes I get weird comments from my family like, you're doing math on your own time and not doing formal activities. I love math. This is the top of his paper. Always fun and thinking classes. And I love that he put thinking in for math, to describe math. I like the academic benefits of math. I actually kind of like DARE problems. And then I'll also leave you with a few true confessions from the teachers that I've been working with. We need more time spent in math class and more time to implement these shifts. I love the self-discovery that students are making with a concept. That self-discovery starts in collaboration, play, and reflection. I feel like it's keeping the content and strategies in their heads so that the learning is lasting. There's a lot of group collaboration, and I think it is preparing them more for this day and age to take a problem and be able to share it and find their voice in that and becoming comfortable with that. This is from a middle school teacher. The students came in different from past years. This is the first time there's uniformity. We can move forward because they all come in with a certain background. Kids are growing in this district. They are helping me with the DARE. This is not just about us at the middle school. So this was really cool to hear her say that she was really seeing this as, this is district. These are all our kids, not just our middle school kids that we're looking at now. So at this point, I open up to your essential questions, any questions that you may have.
Excellent.
That's all you're doing, Carol. Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks. Thanks, everyone.
Is this your first year with the middle school students?
First with middle school.
And
So I
then
was with the 4th grade, then I went to 5th, 6th, and now I'm 7th grade. So it was really fun to walk into 7th grade because I saw all the 6 come together, and that was a real joy to see them all mixed up amongst the classes. Thank you all.
I know, right? Be less like anxiety.
Exactly.
Yeah, like something.
Yeah, right.
Hey. The next agenda item, I know, she did. The school calendar. Last time, I know the board will remember this, we had some discussion about when actually the elections occurred. So what you see before you is a new calendar, and this calendar has a flip. November 5th is now a school day, and professional development is September 16th, because November 5th is not an election day. So it makes that month of November a little less choppy. Other than that, it's still the same, and I know Ernie was interested in having President's Day listed, but President's Day doesn't fall within the February 24th to the 28th. It's in another week.
Lose another. Oh, I lose a lot. But I win.
Is there any other discussion on the calendar, the way it's currently reads?
I move the acceptance of the calendar.
Second. Okay, it's been moved and seconded to accept the revised calendar. Any other questions? All those in favor, signal by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Chair votes aye. Thank you. Excellent.
And
The only other thing I had is American Education Week was November 12th to the 16th, and I would just like to read a letter that went out to our colleagues. And at the top, it has a quote, "Every individual matters, every individual has a role to play, and every individual makes a difference." I think you all have a copy of this. Dear colleagues, every year since 1921, American Education Week provides a welcomed opportunity to pause and celebrate the value of public education. It's a chance to honor the individuals who make such a difference in the lives of children each day. Despite the challenges we continue to face in public education, there has been one thing that does not waver: your resolve and your dedication to make things the very best that they can be for the students of our school community. This is never lost on us, and we are so thankful for the role that you each play in creating a welcoming, kind, positive place for those entrusted to us. In this season of Thanksgiving and in celebration of this week, we are truly grateful for your tireless efforts, your determined spirit, your compassionate presence, and your perseverance in times of great challenge. May the days ahead give you a chance to see the very best of yourselves reflected in the students around you. You make a difference. We celebrate you and we honor you today and all days. With gratitude, and it's from Heather and myself. And I would say that this is very applicable to the school board as well, because you certainly spend a lot of time and energy on behalf of the students of the district. So thank you.
Thank you. Very nice.
Thank you. And that is actually it, other than School Boards Association. And
Yeah, I think everyone got the, or it's in your packet anyway, the delegate assembly is January 26th, which is a Saturday. I'll be there as the board member and also the delegate for the school district. And you can click on any one of those links on that to look at the resolutions that are being proposed for this year. So I don't have a copy of them yet, but click on and I think there's about a half a dozen or so that have been submitted this year. Okay. And if you have any comments before then, just let me know, either positive or negative as far as supporting the resolutions as they go forward. Okay. Great. Okay. On the chairman's report, we have expressions of sympathy to Ryan Russell on the passing of her nephew, and Teresa Livinoy on the passing of her mother-in-law. And that's all I have for the chairman's report. We'll go to committee reports, academic affairs. Wendy?
Sure. First, I want to start with the first reading that we probably quickest for the concussions and head injury. It's JLCJ. This is actually now per state RSA needs to be included in a policy. We were doing it, just not, it was not embedded in our policy manual. And Heather worked with Aaron and the other Alex, the athletic trainer, to develop this policy. We made a couple of grammatical changes. I think it was paragraph 3. It is like sentence 2. This information sheet will be, not may, be incorporated in the parent's permission. And then, let's see, we added on the second page, we added on the second sentence, it says, Stacey had brought up the good points regarding any coach, official, licensed athletic trainer to bring that verbiage consistently down. On the second thing, it says a student athlete who has been removed to play any sport shall not return to play until he or she is evaluated by the licensed athletic trainer and healthcare provider, just to kind of add that verbiage back in there. There is that little, the second, the district may limit the student's athlete participation as determined by the student's treating healthcare provider. We had some questions on that, and Heather was going to go back to Aaron House and just kind of clarify that. We may just need to delete that, we're not sure. So we had some changes, so Heather's going to get back to us and we'll bring this back for second reading. And then Tim wanted to discuss lizard bags.
If we can go
to
just a second.
Yep.
Just to let you know, because I'm also on the board of NHIAA, and And this is a big, big focal point at the Athletic Association as well. They spend a lot of time talking about concussion protocol and changing in schedules. I know the football season on when you can suit up for football practice and all that has changed based on this, and it's not just football, it's right across the entire sports thing. So NHIAA is spending a lot of time on this particular
Yeah, and I would,
issue. So
yeah.
I know you mentioned it down below there.
Yeah, but I think too, I want to, make sure that because it's a policy, we want to make sure that the healthcare provider is signing off the release and the parents together. It wasn't like that before, and so we just, I think it makes it safer for the students. And Tim wanted to talk about blizzard bags. Currently, the state gives up to 5 blizzard bag days, and we have voted as a district to utilize 2. And we talked about, because we already have 2 snow days under our belts here, adding another one this year would be reasonable, we believe. I'm speaking with Kathy, we don't need to have approval from the Department of Education. And if we kind of work as, to have it done in February, we feel like it's reasonable that the teachers would be able to have everything ready to add that 3rd snow day blizzard packet. And I think the communities would be receptive to it because we've had it for a couple of years now, and hopefully kind of keep us in line getting out on time. And you guys have any other questions, comments you want to add from the academic affairs that we were just kind of establishing? We think 3 this year, and perhaps next year we'll think of adding another blizzard bag day, but we think 3.
I know currently Moltenboro has 4.
Yeah.
And they've already gone through one or two. I'm not sure if they did the second one already, but anyway, it's good. It's certainly a challenge with one child. A blizzard bag is good. You have 2 or 3 children at home working blizzard bags. It can be a challenge for the parents, obviously. But I do think it's it's a good idea to be prepared, because who would have expected 2 snow days in November? But that's what we have already. So.
One of the things that the group talked about was the fact that last year, because we had many snow days, we added 15 minutes to the day, and it was an imperfect solution. And I think we all knew that. And so really, we don't want to add another 15 minutes because the value of that is in question. And so I think the likelihood of us having more snow days, since we had a couple of early ones this year, is pretty high. And I think that it was a great discussion. I'm glad you brought it up, because I think there is more value in the blizzard bag day, but it's finding the balance for parents.
Yeah.
So I think right now probably most parents would prefer to have the blizzard bag day and not end up going late in June.
Right.
And I think teachers would probably prefer the same.
Yeah.
And Jack, we also talked about spacing them a little bit, so you're not likely to end up with 3 blizzard bags in 1 week. It's really stormy, but that gets a little monotonous for everybody. Yeah.
That's true too. So that's all I have for academic affairs.
Okay, Ernie, building and maintenance.
Building and maintenance had a meeting this morning. I apologize to members of my committee that were unable to make it. The month ended Friday, and we get an end-of-month report, and we discussed it this morning, so I'll go over some of that material, and then I would ask Kathy to update this list and make sure the other committee members get a copy of it as well. One of my favorite subjects, roofs. First priority is Carpenter Elementary School. The original school, we're looking at replacing that roofing this coming summer. We need to, at Ossipee Central School, we've got a playground walkway and a handicap walkway which is breaking up, and it has to be fixed, and that's the next priority item we've got. The third one is my favorite subject, those oil pumps that are burning all that electricity that I've talked to you about. It turns out, when I want to replace the pumps, I also have to replace 210 feet of underground piping. And so we have to wait till the frost is out of the ground. So we're hoping we can do it in May, in a time period when we can do it while school's going on, but there's no longer the need for the furnaces. It's warm enough, we hope. And so that's might be what you call a slipping edict, estimated time in commission. We don't know what it's going to be right now. The next big energy consumer we have is we have some greenhouses, and they have a sprinkler system. And we have to keep the heat on, except that we're not using them in the wintertime. So what we're looking to do there is to install a dry valve so that we do not have to keep in that heat on in that space. We can save money and energy. And when it's springtime and the students are ready to start their projects, we can turn it back on and be back in business. So we moved that one up in our priority from number 7 to number 4 this morning. And then one of my all-time favorites, I don't know how many of you will remember, but I'm sure Alyssa will, cow wall. Remember the old plastic walls at the high school? Well, most people don't remember, but New Durham School has part of a wall that's all cow wall. Cow wall is plastic, has an R factor of 2.1. I mean, cardboard is better. And so we're heating that space, but what we're going to do is take that wall out and put a new wall in that'll be insulated and a lot more, again, energy efficient, cost effective, trying to save the taxpayers some money here. Tuftonboro Central School. In the old portion of the building, I'm sure Ryan's familiar with that by now, the windows down there, big pretty windows, they still have the lead weights. When you move the windows up and down, they leak like a sieve. So we're looking at doing some energy upgrading on those as much as we can. We're actually going to retain the authentic original features, just in case the Historical Society is interested, but we'll come up with some inside storms or something that'll help tighten up the energy efficiency there. And then the rest of those items on our list here are security adjustments, and I'll just leave it at that. I'm not going to go into great detail on that part, other than making it easier to administer the buildings, make them safer, things like that. The other thing is, Jack talked about, we'd like to ask for $200,000, but that's subject to negotiation. So that issue is up in the air for now, and next month you'll probably get an update on that. The solar field in Effingham that we're looking into, we anticipate having the request for qualified companies, who out there is qualified to do the project. We'll advertise that in the paper probably by the end of the month. Once we know who they are, then we'll ask them to bid on the project and go from there. And with luck, we can proceed next summer. This is a depressing item to me. The Art Center is now 10 years old. I keep thinking of it as a new complex, but and so our turf field out there is also getting older. Original discussion, since the question came up, down south, the turf field's good for about 8 years due to the UV rays. We're a lot further north. We had hoped it would last 10 to 12 years, and since we're at the 10-year point, what we're going to do is bring in some professional outsiders to evaluate it and let us know how long it can go. And if we don't need that $60,000 at the end of the year, we'll let you know. But if we do, and I suspect we will, we'll at least have a professional answer, because we figured what it would cost to replace it when we bought it. 10 years later, I'm sure the price has changed. So again, we'll be looking at that. My list is getting shorter. Anybody on my committee have any questions? Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
Okay. I'll combine finance and human resources, because we talked about those before. We're still negotiating with the three bargaining units. We have one tentative agreement, which we'll discuss in non-public after this meeting. And hopefully we can finalize the other two in time for the final budget hearing in January. So again, we'll put the final budget together under finance, we'll get the negotiated contracts under human resources, and hopefully on January 7th, in the lecture hall, we'll be able to present a final budget to the taxpayers. And that's all I have there. Wendy, anything? No. No, it's not you. It's Julian. All set, okay. All right, thank you. Advanced planning, you can see down below, and there was a change in the time for the New Durham concert to 6 o'clock from 6:15. And the Effingham concert is on the 20th, not the 19th. So if you want to make those changes, those are on the corrected sheet that you have in your packet. Okay, so just in case you want to know. Public input. Any comments? Nope. Okay, thank you. All right, closing comments by board members. Let's start over with Kathy.
Thank you for having us here at Tuftonboro. I love Tuftonboro, and the kids were awesome. I love their positive friendship messages, and I loved it when they were talking about it, reading about their messages, how happy it seemed to make them. And someone said, one of the kids said that I like that it's always kind words. Mm-hmm. So it's always positive messages, and that's making them feel positive about themselves. I also really love this owl tonight. Mm-hmm. What a great idea. And I really like that you're preparing them for what comes next. And I guess that's it.
Thank you, Ryan, for having us. And I also love the owl. It's great. And the students and their messages, I'm going to hang this up at work. I love their little letters that they gave us. And also, Carolyn, she's not here, but she did a wonderful job on the math presentation. We were saying that it would have been great when we were younger if we had something like that. So, thank you. Thank you for having us. I absolutely love this idea too. We should share it with the other elementary schools. I think they would really like it too. Carolyn's presentation was fabulous. She had a lot of energy. She's really positive. I think probably in a classroom, she really gets the students excited. So I liked your presentation as well. And happy holidays to everyone.
Ah, shoot, I thought I was going to actually get my own thing to say. Dittos. Move on.
Yeah, they covered it. But she, what a find. I don't know how she came, but yeah, really wow. That was a great presentation. Thank you for bringing her tonight.
Thank you. Tuftonboro is wonderful. And I would have to just say ditto to the other comments. Go ahead.
Ditto, and Carolyn, she was just so excited about math. And like I said, I would love to have her, and just passionate, and really to see the kids collaborating and working together, because that's really what it is. It's, you're not always going to have the right answer, but knowing where to get it and leaning on your peers and solving it together is really what it's expected in the workforce. And it was an amazing presentation, and Merry Christmas.
My turn. Yeah. Sam, 30 baskets for the community. Please let the students know how much I appreciate that. We always ask our students to get involved in community events, and that's certainly a good thing. I thank you for your effort there. That's neat. I really like that. I think that it's the message that I find so neat. It's really very well done. Thank you. Carolyn, I'm glad I don't have to go back to school. But what you're seeing there is the tip of the iceberg in that we have had multi-year effort in math, starting with the first grade, and the next year it's the first and second, and we're now up to about the seventh and eighth. And this is where she's coming in with this, and she's indicating that the kids seem to be pretty receptive to what's going on, which tells me the programs we've been working on for the last 7 years are beginning to pay fruit, because they'll keep moving up, right up through to the high school ultimately. And so I am thrilled to hear that. And if any of you out there really like math, read the book out, Code Girls. It's awesome. And I never knew the story. But in World War II, they probably had 60,000 women working on breaking codes. And I never knew all that. I knew the English did some over there, but that was about it. And it's a tremendous story to read and get motivated about STEM. Just, it really is good. And so I'm encouraging some of our teachers to read it as well. Jack, thank you for taking on the budget. That's a major effort on your part, and it's very well done, and I just want to say thank you.
You're welcome, and I'm glad we did the budget hearings the way we did them. I thought that worked out well, and I appreciate everything that the principals did in their presentations too. They did a great job, so thank you.
And we had 2 people from Brookfield who attended all 3.
All 3 of them, absolutely.
2 selectmen.
Yeah.
And I think they benefited from it,
Yeah.
and I think they appreciated it, and I think they much better understand our budget process now, where 76% of it is all personnel, so we don't have a lot of money to play with. I'm sitting here begging for $200,000, and I don't even know now if I'm going to get it, and I've got things on the works that are over $300,000 that I need money for, so we manage our money very carefully, but we keep an eye on the bottom line, and it's been productive for the school system.
Sam?
Thank you, Mr. Gopalchik, for having us. I hope that Mrs. Wersher gets to the high school sometime soon. I hope everyone has a great holiday. Thank you.
Thank you. Kelly?
Ditto to everything that everybody else already said. And I just wanted to say that my daughters and I attended Thanksgiving lunch at New Durham School, and it was very nice. We had a very nice time, so thank you to them for doing that.
We don't have. That's okay. All right.
Happy holidays.
Yes, happy holidays to everyone, and thank you too for being here tonight. Pass the word around. We love to have more people from the public. I know sometimes our meetings can be pretty boring, but you know, it's wonderful to have somebody in the audience and ask questions. Thank you again.
Where was she from?
She actually is a consultant, and she lives down in the Bow area. And actually, her mom used to be the superintendent of schools over in Wentworth, and her mother was here with her tonight. She's staying with her mother.
Well, let's do that. I didn't recognize it. Okay. Okay, great.
Jack, I
Yes.
missed one thing.
Sure.
I just wanted to give a shout out to Sam. I don't know if anybody happened to see the paper, but that's a pretty amazing feat that you did, getting all the fundraising and what have you for the speaker system down at the rink. So way to go. Your parents should be very proud of you.
Thank you. I needed it.
Great. Thanks, Sam. Okay, motion to go into non-public under RSA 91A, semicolon 3, paragraph 2 for legal, personnel, and student matters.
So moved. Second.
Kathy? Bridget? Julianne?
Yep.
Jim?
Yes.
Stacy?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, we're in. Thank you.
We need the photo.
Photo op.
Oh, really?
And you're gonna